Welcome to Heart Speak Podcast, episode 58, Staying Centered in the Midst of Change. Well, hello there. How are you doing? With all these changes, all these things happening in the environment around us, wherever you live in the world. I'm not even going to name them. You just have to look at the news, you have to maybe go onto social media and you see it there. So I had thought of saying, staying centered in the midst of chaos. But I thought I would just deal with it in a slightly more gentle way. So what happens when things are happening around us that we don't like? Well, you could do as the ostrich does and sticks its head in the sand. Or you could play dead like the possum. Or you could be like a crab and pull your energy in and hide inside. And all those things are wonderful ways of avoiding what's going on around you. But I have to say, you may not notice, but your body is still under attack. Your body is still sticking out of the sand, or your shell could get knocked over, or the possum who thinks it's dead could still be trodden on. So, as I've seen so much in my own work, many a time we disassociate out into our heads, into our fantasy world, but the body is this faithful servant that gets hit all the time because we think that we are oblivious to what's going on. Sometimes I have people say, oh, I just think positive, or don't think scary thoughts. Well, that really doesn't work. Again, that's a little bit of dissociation. So what we're going to talk about is about how to stay centered and what does that even mean to us. And I hope that you're willing not to be an ostrich. We pull our head out of the earth and say, okay, we are part of this environment. We are part of this world. How do we maintain our own center? So what does this actually mean? And for me, staying in your center is staying in your heart. The center of my being is my heart. And it isn't in my head, it isn't in my feet. And I want to just start with saying we may be using different words. For instance, you may say, well, what does it mean to be centered? I don't know what that is. So let me start by saying, do you know when you are following your intuition? Do you know when your intuition talks to you and it's coming from your heart, from your soul? All right. If you know those things, what does it feel like? It feels centered. I feel centered, people often tell me. Or I feel certain. Or I feel sure. Or I feel right. Or I just know things are moving in the right direction. Sometimes we get goosebumps or we get shivers, or sometimes we even cry. It's like, yes, I'm coming from my center. So I'm going to suggest to you that you look for ways in which you know what it feels like to be coming from your center. Okay? So that inner knowing, coming from your heart, coming from your soul, is coming from your centeredness. Right. Now, the other word we could use is enjoyment. So what do you feel when you are enjoying yourself? Now, that isn't something you say, oh, I'm going to go and enjoy myself, or this was something I'm planning. You can't plan enjoyment, can you? Not true enjoyment. Enjoyment is that time where you just feel open-hearted. You feel, oh, this is fun. This is nice. This is safe. This is secure. This is spontaneous. This allows me to express all that I am. And now you may have a different word for it, but I'm going to use the word enjoyment and say to you, do you actually recognize that in yourself? Those moments where you've just felt, and I say, safe, expansive, connected. And those are times when, again, you're coming from your center, you're coming from your heart. So I want to bring that back to you. And then there's this sense of, when do you feel rested in yourself? And it's many a time when you feel in control, but not having to work at it. It may be a time where you say, wow, I feel most relaxed and safe and secure when I just sit down and maybe I'm reading a good book or talking with a friend or maybe walking my dog. It's a moment where you say, this is something that's radiating out of my heart. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm just coming from that center. So here I'm saying heart-centered enjoyment, heart-centered knowing is truly unconditional. You know what we talk about? We talk about unconditional love. And we say, oh, you know, I love unconditionally. I give to everybody and I receive from everybody and I love everybody. Whoa, there's a lot of conditions in that. So these conditions that are actually coming into our life are not coming from our heart. They're coming from the solar plexus. So wherever there are conditions of how you have to be or how the world has to be in order for me to feel centered, I'm not centered. I'm coming from my solar plexus. Make sense? Unconditional love means being love, not giving or receiving it. Unconditional love is I am in my center and I am both radiating and receiving at the same time. No agenda, no attachment to a result, no wanting something. So we know what it's like to be in our center is where there's no expectations, no attachment, not being affected by either criticism or approval. Hear me, not affected by criticism or approval. In other words, you being centered in yourself can stay there even though the environment around you may be pulling you out of it because of expectations and criticism. Now, is it because you just put your hands on your ears and you cover your eyes and you say, I'm not affected by criticism or approval? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you love the unlovable parts of yourself and you bring those energies into your heart, then you do not feel affected by criticism or approval because those parts that might be being criticized or the part of you needing approval has already received that within your heart through love. What am I saying? Criticism can't touch you if you already love those parts that are being criticized. Approval can't touch you if you're already approving of those parts that you think are inadequate or needing self-assurance or self-confidence. This is a very deep subject, as you can hear me say. So being in your center is about radiating out of your heart. And here's a short exercise I'd love you to do with me, because the one thing that we do have control over, we have very little control over things, but what allows us to stay in our center, and this is what someone like Viktor Frankl talked about in the concentration camp, was that he couldn't control a lot of things, but what helped him survive was being able to control some things. Does that make sense? It's not holding on to control of things you can't control. It's actually honoring and loving the things you can control. And one thing we can control is our breathing. We can't do much else. You really can't influence with a conscious mind, your heart rate. You can if you use biofeedback, but I'm saying generally the one thing we have is our breathing. I can choose to breathe in, I can choose to breathe out, and I can hold my breath for probably about 3 or 4 minutes. And that's the kind of cosmic joke that it's almost as if the divine creator said, okay, let's give them free will, because we have free will on this planet, and we'll give them breath, and they can have free will for about 3 or 4 minutes. I like that joke, because it's really quite funny that we think we have free will, but there's so much that goes on around us that we actually don't have that will, or things are happening. As I said last time in the podcast, 95% of our thinking is unconscious. So let's work with our breath just at this moment. And many of you may already use your breath as a means of meditation or calming, mindfulness. And what I'm very aware of is that often we say, take a breath in, and we kind of focus on our abdomen. Maybe you don't, but we kind of say, okay, fill out here and then breathe back in. But what I'm aware of is we very rarely talk about filling out from our chest and from our back and from our sides. Does this make sense? So it's almost like I want you to breathe in and feel the expansion of your whole chest, as if your heart is sending golden light out from your heart and it's expanding your chest, not just up and down, but front and back, side to side. Let's try this. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, filling your front, back, sides, and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. It actually takes effort, doesn't it? Because we're not used to doing that. There's a kind of a lazy breathing. We may breathe in and we just almost just don't move the diaphragm that much, don't move our sides very much. And I would be saying to you, this is a really good exercise to get back into your center. Breathing in, side to side, front, back, breathing out. Seeing your heart chakra in the center of this. And as I say, you can imagine blowing yourself up like a beautiful golden balloon and then letting the balloon's gas come out again. I am a golden balloon, and I am a golden balloon that's expiring as well. And obviously, as you do this, you allow that golden balloon to spread from your heart, center point of the heart, but it spreads all around you. So your balloon is above your head and beneath your feet. There we go. That's one of the quickest and best ways of becoming centered. So you're not centering just up and down, in and out, but you're centering in a circular way, a way which is far more realistic to our lives, because so much of our life is based on a linear pattern, past, present, future. I've got to go somewhere, I've come from somewhere. What if the only place you've come from is your center? And the only place to come back to is your center. So what does it mean to be centered? It doesn't mean standing on the center of what I might call a seesaw, or you might call a teeter-totter, one of those things that two people can move around. Standing in the middle of our life isn't what our life's about. We're not here to just say, look, I'm centered, I'm centered, I'm centered, I'm balanced, because that isn't how nature is. You just have to look at the beautiful moon or the sun, and everything moves. Everything has an expansion and a contraction, we could call it, an in and an out, a waxing, a waning. Now you might say, well, I'm not part of this earth. Well, maybe you're not, but you are. So our journey is not just to be in the center and say, I'm centered, I never move. The purpose of our journey is to expand our movement away from the center and return to the center, like the breath. And ultimately, we will be doing both at the same time, not wanting to confuse you, but we are both moving out and in at the same time, which actually intensifies the center. I won't go too far along that just this moment. But let's just come back to the fact of why do we need to move away from our center? It's like the infinity sign. If we only just make a tiny figure of 8 around the center, and what we bring back to the center is the wisdom of our experiences, those wisdom of the energy we're bringing back to the center is very limited, and it doesn't feed our center. So the further we get, the larger the figure of 8, the further we move away from our center, the further we expand into our environment, the further we create out into our environment, the greater the chance of bringing something big back into our center. In other words, let me try it another way. I don't want to be around people who have never taken risks. I don't want to be around people who say, I've always stayed safe, which means I've always stayed just around where I am and I never go far from my center. I want to know people who have stretched themselves in all directions from their center, taking risks that maybe for someone else isn't a big deal. It's not about going to climb Everest or do something like that. It's saying, what would be an expansion of yourself that is a little scary? Oh my goodness, but it feels so right to do it. That's what I'm inspiring you to do. Where are you waiting for something to happen before stepping forward and saying, I am being called to expand myself beyond my normal range of movement? And if you think back into your life, again, the idea of right and wrong is just so man-made, forget it. It's not about judging what you did. Ooh, I wouldn't have done that. No, you probably wouldn't have. I know you know. I know you wouldn't have done that. What you're not interested in is whether it was right or wrong. It's how much wisdom, how many jewels of energy, how many fruits of endeavors did you bring back to your center because of your experience? How rich have you become because of your courage to move away from your center? Yes? Good. So you think of the moon at the moment, which we're here in a very new moon. It's beautiful to look at. But that the light of the moon, which is coming from the sun, gets bigger and bigger until we get to a full moon. And this is called the hero's journey. So the hero, which is the light, leaves the darkness of the moon, which I could see in the last couple of days, it's still present. So the darkness is the center, and the light of the moon is that which grows away from the center until it becomes a full moon. The full moon is when you are in full expression of whatever seed you planted at the new moon. You understand? So the new moon is planting the seed. Then your hero's journey helps that seed to grow, to blossom. And then at the full moon, ta-da, I'm there. But then the other side, the waning moon, is what fruit are you going to take from that full moon? What are the gifts that you gain? What wisdom did you gain? And as you watch the light of the moon get smaller and smaller, you realize that this is about the light of the moon feeding the darkness, the center of the moon, your center, with that wisdom, so that the center gets stronger and more, in fact, filled with consciousness, we could call it, lighter. And again, I don't want to mix my metaphors. But our total purpose in creating a reality for ourselves is to expand our awareness and awareness of who we are. In other words, what you see in the outer world and what you react to in the outer world is only what your center has created in order for you to know yourself. So we interact with our reality, with our creations in order to know ourselves. I know I've spoken about this before, but the main part of this is it isn't just to have an experience. It's about bringing the fruits and the wisdom back to your center to strengthen your center. So the further you've gone from your center, had an experience, brought the wisdom back, the stronger you feel. That's as simple as I can say it. So whatever experiences you've had, please don't just say, oh, I'm so pleased I'm not in that experience anymore. Go back, find out why you created it, why you as a mighty soul created it. Not because of karma, not because of anybody else. Why did you create that reality in order to know yourself? And then bring the wisdom back into your heart. Bring it into your heart and say, I love that part of me, or I bring into my heart that wisdom, and you will become stronger and more centered in your reality. Okay? Now, the next step is, why do we get pulled out of our center? All right. So I'm trying to say to you, it isn't correct that we should just live in our center all the time. Forget that. But it also, there are times where we actually don't live from our center. And when I look at energy fields, and this is what I do in my work, I can see people's energy fields very simply, easily. I look to say, is this person coming from their center? Do I see that expansion and contraction of their bubble? And I have to say, often, and more often than not, I don't see that. So on simple terms, I'm going to say, sometimes I see the energy very much on the right side of the body. That's just the way I see it. And when I see that as the masculine doing self. This doesn't mean the person isn't beautifully feminine if they're a woman, etc., or a man. But I'm just saying is I see the evidence of a more doing nature. And when I see the intensity of that energy, it's as if this person is driven by rules, by what they need to get done, by their masculine chakras, the base chakra, the solar plexus, the throat chakra. I've got to do this. I have to do this. This is my duty. This is my responsibility. If I don't do this, I won't feel safe. I don't want to get criticized. I've got to do it. I've got to do things that I get approval. So it's all about almost fear-driven of I cannot be me except by living up to the rules of other people. And those rules are so deeply embedded. They've probably come from past lives, from different cultures, ancestors. It's, you know, we often can't find the cause of them. But the fact of the matter is we're not coming from our center. Because when we're coming from our center, we're coming from a place of love. We're coming from a place of our soul saying, we are going to create this reality away from the center in order to know ourselves. When we get fixated on following someone else's rules or someone else's drum, you know, dancing to someone else's drum, then we're not living from our center. We're fixated on pleasing other people, believing that they will take us to our center, which they can never do because they're not in their center. And it becomes an addiction, doesn't it? It's, even if I say to someone, even if I say to myself, you know, you're not living from your center, someone will look at me and go, yeah, I know that, but don't stop me. Because this is the reality I know. This is how I define myself. This is the identity I know. So stop, go away, Christine. Stop telling me I'm not living from my center, my inner knowing. I like this, and this is what I've done for years, even though it's killing me. And that's what I often see, something like fibromyalgia, a chronic fatigue syndrome, where people are just living from everybody else's expectations and not their own. Or even Lyme's disease, where I see people almost stepping to the side of themselves, which is very interesting. I think, wow, what is it in your own beingness that you don't want to live? I mean, I have to say I'm fascinated by that condition. I often can diagnose Lyme's by seeing this person stand by the side themselves. And I'll say, have you ever been diagnosed as having Lyme's? Oh, yes. So energy fields tell us a lot. And it is that addiction that I just want to say in a very brief way is I can't stop. I mean, it's not for me to stop anybody. Nobody can stop you. It's a point where often we get sick or a crisis happens when we go, what am I doing? It's almost like we're brought back in center again and say, what am I doing following those rules? They're not serving me. They're not bringing me closer to myself. They're just causing me separation. So when we are following rules that continually harm or hurt or diminish or shame or cause fear, it is separating. When we follow rules that bring us back closer to ourselves, that's love. So are your rules bringing you closer to yourself? Is your journey, is your expansion, somehow you know you need to be there because it's going to bring you closer back or bring you back to yourself? And sometimes we can be in a crisis and we think, what am I doing here? And yet there's that sense, even though chaos and pain may be happening, there's a sense of, I know I need to be here. But that can only come when we even have a sense of knowing or a sense of self that has a recognition of this. In other words, if we're living completely from a victim status that the world just happens to us and life just happens to us and I don't have choice, we can never find that center. The victim never knows the center, I'm sorry. So when we take responsibility and say, well, I know I created this, I don't like what I created, but there's something about this that's going to bring me closer to myself, then you'll know the difference between just feeling as if you're out of touch with your center and living someone else's life or living from your own truth. Does what you're doing give you pleasure? Does it give you that same enjoyment? Does it connect you to you? If not, step back, walk away, walk back to your center. You might not know where you're going, but you know where you don't want to be anymore. Sometimes I see people very heavy laden in their lower body, what I see there is overwhelmed with water, overwhelmed with everybody else's emotions. Again, thinking, well, if I swim through this, then maybe there's something on the other side. Well, your original view about maybe I should get in and save these people probably was right. But when does it get right? When you are now losing the fight to live, or your life has been taken over by the emotions of other people. I'm not making this I don't want to make it too simplistic. Everybody's lives are very complex. But does this give you pleasure? Does this give you enjoyment? Does it have that sense of inner knowing, yes, this is where I need to be? You see, you have to know what it feels like to feel centered, to know whether what you're doing is right for you. Sometimes we struggle. You know, that's the addictive side. We're stubbornly holding on to an old pattern. No, it's fine, when we really know it isn't. You know, for years, they've written on the package of a cigarettes, this could cause you to die. People still smoke. So it might be not just smoking that's killing you. What is taking you away from your center? What is making you feel you don't have your life force? And one of the most important things when we come to health is having a healthy immune system. And having a healthy immune system is having the difference between feeling helpless and feeling in control, but not from a place of I'm in control, from fear, but I know who I am. There is a sense of self, a love of self. And when I developed breast cancer, which is part of my immune system, I had lost myself. I'd lost myself in the needs of other people. I had to come home to myself. I had to let go of everything that I was doing until I could sort out what it was that was true to myself. So you have to have the courage to walk away. It doesn't mean give up your family or give up everything, but it says, I'm sorry, at the moment, I don't know what's my center. I don't know where this information is coming from. Having a sense of what is right for me and what isn't. It isn't right and wrong. It's just what nurtures me, what gives me pleasure is a healthy immune system. And so many experiments have been shown that when we have helplessness, and we do that very quickly when we put people in hospitals, we take away their identity in many ways. We don't give them information. We keep them small, and we create fear. This is the quickest way of dismissing and diminishing the immune system. So where are you feeling helpless? Where are you feeling out of control? What can you control in your life? And again, what Viktor Frankl said, he couldn't control the events in the concentration camp, but he could control how he breathed, what he tasted, what he smelt, what he felt under his feet. That's what I want you to do. Really, that mindfulness is not just about calming you, it's bringing you back into things you can control. I can enjoy this food. I can choose not to eat that food. I can enjoy the smells around me. I can enjoy the sounds of birds. I can enjoy the sun on my face, the rain on my face. I can experience these things. It's maybe not even enjoying. I can experience these things. These things are in my control. When I feel the world around me is attacking me or making me out of control, then I have to come back very simply to things. I saw the new moon and Venus last night, and I thought, wow, that's something I can enjoy. Nobody can take that moment. And that's why we talk about living in the now. That moment of enjoyment of seeing Venus and the new moon together is a moment that I took into my heart, and nobody can ever take that away. It made me feel centered, connected, aligned. So in all of what I'm saying, I'm hoping you will start to not look at where am I losing my center, but how do I come back to it? Simple body things as I'm describing, smell, taste, touch. Simple feelings. Do I enjoy this? Is this nurturing me? Is this bringing me closer to myself? Simple things like, does this resonate with my inner knowing? However different the circumstances are. And where am I allowing information to actually disorientate me? So I just want to finish with this. At the moment, we have an epidemic of a virus. But I want you to understand that a virus is very different from a bacteria. A bacteria is like a little animal that will take advantage of your body or anything if you get run down. Let's put it that way. So the bacteria aren't bad, they live in our body, but if a part of our body doesn't function well, then a bacteria will often say, goody, goody, I'll live there a little bit more. This is what pneumonia is, when someone's lungs aren't working as well as they could do. All right, they are not the cause of the problem, they often take advantage of a problem. A virus is very different. A virus is made up of DNA or RNA, and this is information. This is what lives in your cells. So when we get affected by a virus, then it's literally that virus is bringing information into our body that changes our consciousness. And someone like Rudolf Steiner talked about how viruses, childhood viruses, can actually be effective to change consciousness, that you see a child actually develop. Now, I'm not wanting to get into the vaccine problems, and I don't want to get into saying, yes, every virus is great, a childhood virus, because I've seen children be affected badly by viruses. But I'm wanting to say viruses are literally consciousness, thinking, information, all right? How those viruses enter into our body is a choice whether or not that information, let's just call it information, whether that information takes you closer to yourself or further from yourself. And what is the source of the information? Years ago, I saw Fred Hoyle, who was a great astronomer, talking about how he had seen waves of viruses come in from outer space. Now, you can take whatever idea you want, but I want you to understand viruses are way outside our understanding of just our human body. And what's happening at this time and will happen in the future is that this is information. Just think of how we talk about viral, this went viral. And we always like exciting, that little video went viral. And now we're with a virus and it's spreading at the same rate. Don't get scared by this. I mean, I'm wanting you to understand this is information. Information is all around us. How you choose to take that information into yourself, or whether you believe it creates a greater consciousness for yourself, is up to you. This is why I'm coming back to saying heart speak. Stay in your center, knowing that from that center you move in and out. But does this information allow you to feel more full, more knowingness, or does it take you away from your center? It's not right and wrong. Everything that's going on in the world today is about information. Who rules the information in our world? You rule it. You rule your willingness to hear. So as I say, putting your hands over your head or pretending you're not hearing it is not the option. It's a question of, from my centeredness, from my empowerment, do I choose to let this information into my beingness? Or do I choose for my immune system to reject it? Your choice. So let's just finish with a brief meditation. If you are wherever you can be, obviously not when you're driving or not when you're doing anything that's dangerous, please have your feet on the ground. If you want to, you can stand. And we're going to see ourselves as trees. So first of all, with your feet on the ground, and you're breathing into your feet, feel there's a magnet on the soles of your feet. And there's a larger magnet in Mother Earth, and she's pulling you into her. And as you've done before with me, develop roots into Mother Earth. And feel the safety, the security, the nurturing that comes from Mother Earth surrounding your roots, supporting without suffocating. And feel really secure. So whatever you need to do to get your roots secure, let them be secure. You may need to go deeper, wider, whatever needs to happen for you. Now come up your roots, up your legs, and see your legs, your body as the trunk of the tree. And that trunk doesn't need to be so solid that it can't bend. So let your trunk be flexible, but not so flexible that it bends over too much. And look at the bark on your trunk. Let it be thick enough to be a good immune system, but not so thick that it's rigid. Let things move in and out so you can breathe through your trunk. And then finally, go up to your branches and imagine your branches going in all directions. You can be whatever tree you want and any season. But I would suggest your branches going in all directions. And let your branches and your roots complement each other, as wide, as tall as your roots are. And then come back to your center and say, I am that I am. Back into your heart. And know that as you breathe in and out into your tree, all the energy moving through your tree, out to the sun, out to the center of the earth, out to the environment, you're also at the same time drawing that energy back into your heart. And knowing there is no place to go except for where you are right now. You take as long as you want to come back, making sure you come back through your feet on the ground. And until next time, stay centered, stay in your heart, and many blessings.
Thanks for listening to the Heart Speak podcast with Dr. Christine Page. Remember to check out other episodes in the podcast archive section on www.christinepage.com. And do share with friends, family, and colleagues. Join us next time for another edition of Heart Speak.